Hello, and welcome to Negotiate to Get Your Needs Met webinar with John and Jennifer Schober. Hope that you are having a good evening or afternoon whenever you're watching this webinar. Looking forward to chatting with you a little bit. I am recording this live, or at least I'm here live. Now, portions when we get to the recording here, or when we get to the presentation, there are some portions of it that are pre-recorded. So if you see Jennifer, tell her that she did a great job, even if she was on Memorex. We're going to talk tonight about some of the things that Jennifer and I have discussed over the past few months in regards to how we've learned to negotiate to get our needs met. Some of the resources that we used, tools we used, and so I am going to play portions of the interview. Jennifer did not want to do this presentation live, so we recorded her portion earlier about a week or so ago, and so I'll be playing that over the audio chat. I am in the chat room, so if you have questions, comments, you can leave them in the chat room. You can also send me any questions or comments in Twitter at @JSchober, #maximize, and would be happy to chat with you during this presentation. So without further ado, we are going to talk about negotiate to get your needs met.
Get higher highs and even lower lows. Is it free or me? Nobody knows.
Now, more than ever, we can ask, is it live or Memorex?
Is it live or is it Memorex? We won't tell. Portions of this program are pre-recorded.
Fantastic.
I have with me for this webinar my wonderful, lovely wife, Jennifer. Hello, Jennifer. How are you?
Perfect.
But we won't tell you which ones are pre-recorded and what's live. So if you're in the webinar and you have a question to ask, I am in the chat room. So feel free to chat with me in the chat room, or you can tweet at @JSchober, #maximize. So would love to chat with you, and we'll respond to some of your questions in real time. So this is our first Maximize Others Leadership Resources webinar, and we're going to go through some questions that that people have sent us over the past, it's probably been a month or so since we've been asking people for questions. One of the ones that keeps coming up. So Jennifer, you and I were in a teleseminar last week, and it was the Dan Miller 48 Days to Your Work You Love seminar. And we were talking about how we used a phrase, negotiate to get your needs met. What did you say to that seminar?
I thought that was one of my most valuable takeaways from our coaching session that we went through. 6 months of coaching, personal coaching for John and personal coaching for mine. And one of my most amazing takeaways was that I could use the phrase negotiate to get my needs met with John. He is a high D, which is a very dominant, controlling type of personality. And I am not. I am the opposite of that. And
I'm a really meek, mild-mannered individual.
Right.
Not at all.
Throughout the 20 years of our marriage, whenever we have differing opinions, it seems that we would butt heads and have very, very intense conversations. And I learned if I would use the phrase, John, I need to negotiate to get my needs met, it immediately disarmed him. And he looked at me as, oh, how can I help you? Instead of feeling like I'm being attacked or I'm being questioned as whether or not my motives are pure or whatever. And it just has changed the dynamic in which we work together.
So obviously it's more than just kind of magical words. What does it mean when we say negotiating to get our needs met? What does that mean?
For me, when I say it, I am asking him to put aside all of his predisposed thoughts and opinions, set aside all of his original plans and thoughts, and actually listen to my request, not actually looking as a way to counter him, but as actually looking to see I have a need that is not being met, and I am determined to figure out how to negotiate to get those needs met.
Yeah, so all of us have needs that need to be met. So some of my needs, a couple of mine are command and control, I'm also sort of a life of the party. Those are some big needs. I need to have people involved. I need to be doing something very, very fast paced. But your needs, and this is what we picked up in coaching, shocker, the husband and wife are opposite.
Complete opposites.
Complete opposites. Really, some of your needs really focused around deep relationships, security, slowing down in some of those decision-making processes.
Mm-hmm.
Those are what some of your needs were. So when we talk about, when we say, and so we've kind of made it a little bit of a joke around our house. I'm negotiating to get my needs met. It's not from a position of manipulation or something else. It's from a position of, I need to have some security, or I need to be a little bit slower on the decision-making process, or something along those lines needs to happen, because we each have very real and very legitimate needs that each of us need to have met.
The interesting thing that happens, though, is in the past, if there was something that John and I disagreed on, I would come to him and say, hey, I don't like the way you're handling this, or I totally disagree with you on this. Whereas now when I say, hey, I really need to negotiate to get a need met, it's not a combative discussion.
Yeah.
It actually is look, there's something that's not okay with me. And by putting myself out there, it puts me in a place of vulnerability to say, I'm not okay right now. Maybe you can help me, instead of looking at him as a source of a problem, or there was a problem and he needs to fix it.
Yeah,
So-
it gave us a language, and you're exactly right. Some of our, shall we say, most interesting conversations, most high volume conversations, a lot of times come from that. If you present something with me and say, hey, I want to do X, Y, Z, and here's why, my reaction is, okay, well, let's go down the list. Boom, boom, boom. Well, I don't want to do it because of this, this, and this. And so I get into this very task focused, this is not what I want to do, or this is the wrong decision because of A, B, and C. And I get very focused on the tasks about the decision. And actually, when you say, hey, what's really going on, it's not about, do we put the kids to bed at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock tonight? It's really about, I have a need over here of security, or I have this need over here
Of quiet.
And that's really what the need is. So you can argue with me all day long about the difference between 9 and 10 o'clock. That's really not what I'm trying to negotiate. What I'm trying to negotiate is, I need some peace and quiet. That's one of the biggest things that we picked up while we were in coaching. One of the questions: how do you assess the skills and strength? How do we go through this process? I mean, we took a test, we went through coaching. What did you do? Because I was the one that was like pushing this on you.
I begrudgingly decided to go along with John and do a marriage coaching session versus just John. And we both took Strength Finders assessment tests. We both took a DISC profile test. Each of us spent 1 or 2 sessions with individualized coaching, analyzing our dreams and our goals, and discussing the characteristics and strengths about ourselves that made us just thrive, and the different characteristics that sucked the life out of us. And then we had a coaching session together where our coach actually looked at both of our strengths and our DISC profiles, and then mapped it out for us to show us, okay, for John, who's a very strong D and I, dominant and people person and influencer, when he goes life of the party and spur of the moment decisions, just so happens that those kind of decisions and that fly by the seat of his pants and change his mind on a moment's notice actually is extremely detrimental to a person with steady and the analytical and the really peace-minded and peaceful-looking type of personality I am. And it was extremely helpful because I saw that John was really wired by God to thrive and to think and to react and act the way he was. And I, on the other hand, am really wired by God to be almost the completely polar opposite of him. but actually seeing the characteristics and the strengths and the way that he's wired and the way he thinks and what makes him thrive and what makes him come alive, and seeing what drains him, and vice versa, for him to see my report. When he read my 27-page report and he took the time to do it, it was eye-opening to both of us to see how different actions and decisions we've made can actually really affect positively or negatively our mate without even having a clue. And so it's just been extremely helpful for our marriage.
Yeah, I think the big thing was, after I read your report, is I was like, oh, that's why I'm driving you crazy, because pretty much everything about me is polar opposite to what brings you comfort and security. And, it is interesting. We could get into sort of a philosophical conversation about why does God often put these opposites together. And I think it not to be cliche-ish, but it is this whole, you complete me kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And, you do bring a lot of value. You bring a lot of very deep relationships to us and to our family and analytics. You think about my wild ideas more than I think about my wild hair ideas. True. We should probably not have you think about them right now, because some of my ideas are pretty crazy. I know it was one of the things was, and Jennifer's not exaggerating, she kind of came through the process kicking and screaming, but it really, we went through this coaching, and it, I thought it was going to be this very business related coaching process. And it really helped our marriage and our relationship in a way that I was kind of surprised. So, one of the questions here, to ask if you're on the chat room or in Twitter is, do you have a spouse, a partner that you're opposites with, and how has that been?
Or better yet, do you have someone that you're clashing with all the time, and maybe you need to know about why you're clashing?
Yeah, maybe in the work environment or family environment. Either one, you can have people that you're trying to really negotiate to get your needs met, right? Mm-hmm. Now, we homeschool 7 children, ages 7. Yes. Annalise will be 4. We have a couple questions about homeschooling. Can you tell us anything about homeschooling, and how has this process helped you as a homeschooling mom? Do we treat all of our kids the same?
Absolutely not. But I sure thought we were going to. I went into having children thinking that I was going to treat each of them the same. And then as God gave me drastically different children, I have learned that I cannot possibly treat any of them the same at all. They are so uniquely designed by God, so gifted and talented and creative and so different. We have 7 completely, totally different children living in this home that we are raising at the same time.
What are some of the... we have a phrase. We treat each of our children exactly the same, uniquely different. What are some of the personality styles? And as a parent, as a homeschooling mom, how have you been able to use some of these personality styles through homeschooling and through parenting?
Well, we haven't actually put our children through any of the DISC or Strength Finders, so I don't know.
Why not? How come we haven't done that?
Because they're still being molded and they're in the process. And last year's test would be different from this year's test, just based on hormones and thoughts and feelings. But, within a few years of them being born, we knew, we had a very computer analytical, take things apart, behind the scenes little boy. And then we had a bookworm little girl. And then we had an artsy, crafty, creating dramas and plays. Like within the first 3 years, we have a playwright and a novelist and a computer genius with just the first set. And then we have 4 more that just came out and blew us away because they didn't fit the mold of the first 3. And
our first 3 were, none of them are really like dominant in their personality styles. They're all fairly passive. They're very strong, IS and Cs. Our latter 4, or at least 3 of the latter 4, we have some strong Ds in there, don't we?
We have some strong, dominant leader child number 4 and child number 5 are in competition always to see who's going to run the show. It
Yeah.
is mind-blowing.
I
to
think
me.
they compete with us too. It's not just
Yes.
child number 4 competing with child number.
Oh,
It's
no.
child number 4 and 5 competing with mom and dad.
Yeah.
And by the way, I mean, it's not. Let's make something clear, because one of the questions here was, what if I want to be a leader? Let me go through it here. What do I do if I want to lead but don't have the qualities of natural born leaders? I think that's something that people talk about. Oh, well, a leader is this very gregarious person, very outgoing, flashy personality. Now that's probably somewhat my style, but that is not the definition of leaderships. You can have leaders that have. But if you don't know what the DISC profile is, it's D is the dominant kind of strong lion personality. The I is the life of the party. Kind of the class clown type of person,
Influencer.
strong influencer. S is the steady, just the true friend. Oftentimes you'll see the S as it's the Labrador Retriever. It's the true friend. And C is that person that's very much into compliance and details, and you'll often see them described as the beaver. So those are what the personality profiles are. But the point is, there is no defined leadership style. You can have leadership styles that are heavy in any one of these things. And I think the thing that we've learned as parents, and that we're learning as leaders in the business world, is the key is, one, knowing what your style is, being able to recognize the styles in other people so that you can effectively communicate, so that you can effectively get your needs met. And then through that, you can be a better leader. So, it's not, here's the leader is the flash in the pan, rah guy. That's not the definition of a leader. There are people that, Jennifer, sweetheart, you're a leader. Just come to our house on just about any given Friday when you have like 20 homeschooling moms over here, and you lead them through your loyalty and friendship and deep relationships. So even though our styles are very different, that doesn't make one of us a leader and the other person not a leader. So to the question there, what do I do if I want to lead but don't have the qualities of natural born leaders? I just want to say you do have the qualities of a natural born leader. Embrace what those strengths are, embrace what those skills are, and lead with them.
We've always told our children from the time they were very little, going into their Sunday school classes or whatever they're involved with, okay, you need to go in and be a joy and a light and a helper, because you are a leader. You know that God's got good plans for you and he wants to use you. And we've always told them, no matter what personality. John David is a very behind the scenes guy, and yet people look up to him because he's always serving. He's always in a leadership position of some type. And he doesn't have that same outgoing personality that John has. And anyway, all of our children, we have just continued to foster that God wants to use them. He's got good, wonderful gifts and qualities in them, and that he wants to put them in positions where he can use them with their own friends and in their own classes. And we just position and tell them, from as long as they can remember, that they are just part of the leadership team, and they're part of God's team. And you'd want to edit some of this as well.
No, I'm not going to edit any of this.
Rambling.
I am not. Okay, right now, I want you to tweet. Right now, if you think I should edit it, tweet at Jay Schober.
We told our kids they're leaders. All of them. All 7 of them. So.
Yeah. Again, not to be cliché, but I do think that we have a responsibility to lead. And I think all of us can be leaders. I think that we all should be leaders. Now, I think the challenge is for us to recognize kind of in what sphere of influence God has called us to lead in. Some of us are to be leaders in our family. Some of us are to be leaders in our community. Some of us to be leaders in business, church, whatever. I think the challenge is knowing where those right boundaries are of our leadership. In the kingdom, we're called a royal priesthood. This is not a passive, sit on the sidelines, follower type of mentality. The only one we're supposed to follow is Christ, and everyone else we're supposed to be leading everyone to Christ. So if you're not leading people, I think that I just want to challenge you on whether or not you're really fulfilling your responsibilities.
Okay, but I'm going to counter that because there are a lot of people that actually just don't have the self-confidence. And I believe that as parents, that this is one of our opportunities that God has given us to train our child in the way they should go, and when they're old, they won't depart from it. And some of that is the biblical training and all of that, but some of it is their natural gifts and talents. And when we speak life into them and we actually really pour into them and explain to them how God has created them so unique, He's given them so many gifts and passions and talents, and that wherever that they go and whatever they do, they can do it, their work in excellence for the Lord, and they will just naturally become a leader. And as parents, we have the privilege of teaching our children that. And I have to say that if you haven't been taught that, it doesn't come natural. And so that's just something you have to learn. You have to begin to embrace the fact that God actually created you and you're a masterpiece, and that you as a 44-year-old adult have unique talents and gifts from God, and He has amazing things He wants you to do. And you can go into a room and talk to people and change people's lives by just speaking life, and you can go in and influence people, but you have to begin to understand that your worth and value comes from who you are because of God. And when you know that, if you grow up your whole life knowing that, you are just naturally a leader. If you're like me, where I've just been learning it along the way, you kind of get into it a little bit slowly. But over time, if you begin to embrace what God thinks about you, you will naturally flow in those characteristics.
Yeah, the two things there. One is you talk about speaking life. You say that like every day. Is you're speaking life to Joseph, or you're speaking life to somebody.
Yeah.
What do you mean when you say that?
We have the power of life and death in our tongues. We have the ability to speak life and death to anybody and everyone we speak to. We can walk past someone and smile and give them an encouraging word, or we can look with our eyes down and just ignore people. We give people signals and messages all the time, but we have so much power in what we say. Well, in the process of raising 7 children, there is a drastic difference when I am just on somebody's case and talking about what they're not doing right versus when I'm actually turning it and saying, you know, you just did that amazing. You are so awesome at how you just did that. You just spent some time working on that. I'm so proud of you. The attitude shift in our little children's hearts is so powerful when we take a few minutes, when we speak life. We talk about how God created them, how incredibly unique and wonderful that they are. And everybody makes mistakes. That's not a problem. But just when you really spend some time talking to somebody and teaching them about what God thinks, and talking to your kids and telling them what God thinks of them, they will become inside of their spirit. Something comes alive in them, and you see light bulbs going off. You see joy in their eyes, and it's just powerful when you speak truth to somebody and you speak life to somebody. And you just need to be very mindful that the words that you speak do have power in them, and they will either bring life or death. And God just has given us a lot of power with our words.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that happened several years ago, but Joseph was one of our more challenging children, growing, you know, as an infant, as a small child. We didn't figure this out for a while. We had a lot of stomach problems. I mean, my goodness, how many times did we clean up puke and it was gross and disgusting. And I won't describe it on the air because then everyone will turn off. And you won't tweet me at Jay Schober. By the way, did I say that you can send me a chat and chat with me, any questions that you have, and tweet at Jay Schober? Joey will be very proud if I get to 1,000 tweets. But anyway,
back to Joseph. So the nurses brought me Joseph after he was like 2 hours old, and they said, he needs his mama. We can't figure out how to make him happy. And I spent his first night pacing and jiggling and holding him and walking the halls and trying like crazy to get my little brand new son to stop crying. And I spent weeks and weeks with him up on my left shoulder. And we had about 2 years of diarrhea and stomach problems, digestive problems, that finally, after many, many doctors and many different tests and trial and error, we came to understand that he had a gluten intolerance and dairy intolerance, and sugars made him wild and crazy. And he basically had a disposition that was just angry and very unattached, not just, he just was unhappy most of the time because
he was a sick boy. I mean,
was.
he was always sick.
And so it would be the kind of thing where you'd go in and wherever you went, people knew they were, that we were coming and it was going to be a challenge. And I pretty much couldn't leave him with anyone. And we had a wonderful friend, Shirley, who came over and spent a day taking over all of our children. We had 6 children at that time. And she just said, I'm giving you a day. And she had fostered many children of her own. And she just knew she could handle ours no matter how hard the challenge was. And John and I took an entire day, some Saturday, and left. And Joseph was 2 or almost 3 at that time.
Yeah.
And when we came home at like 8 o'clock at night, my house was peaceful. Children were all happy. And Shirley wasn't losing her mind at the end of the day. And she greeted us with all the little arts and crafts projects that they'd made. But the one that stood out was an acrostic that she had made for Joseph that she said that God gave her.
And this is so true because you said a little bit ago, train up your child in the way they should go. And really, this is all about speaking to your kids. We're using this example of children because we're parents, but whatever your leadership position is, whether you're a parent or business leader or church leader or whatever, what we're about to say is when you speak in and you call someone who God sees them as, God has a calling on your life. He has a gifting and ability for you. And really, this is what Shirley spoke. Shirley spoke something to a 2-year-old boy who was sick and began to call him the way that God saw him. And so what was the acrostic that she gave us?
The acrostic was the letters of his name, Joseph, and it was joyful, obedient, smiley, energetic, patient, and happy. And from that day, we have probably proclaimed that over him, taught him it himself. Every single family member of ours has told him. We have all pronounced that he is joyful and obedient and smiley and energetic and patient and happy. And that's who Joseph is. And that was completely contrary to the actions and what we're actually dealing with on a day-to-day basis. But over time, he has begun to embrace it. We have embraced it. Our family's embraced it. And I have a very joyful, obedient, smiley, very energetic, patient,
highly energetic
still. 7 years old now, 5 years later. And we have not stopped claiming that for him. And I believe that drastically changed our view. Someone came into our home and into our life and spoke life into a situation in which we were desperate for help. And that changed our perspective drastically that day. And we embraced it. We knew that God had a good plan for Joseph. And we were struggling. But when we began to speak life and we began to seek God for wisdom, he helped us tremendously along the way. And Joseph has thrived.
One last question kind of along the same lines here is this came in, I know who said this. How do we educate the next generation in leadership principles? What are we doing with our kids to help them as leaders?
We have them involved in church and all kinds of homeschooling activities. But I have to say, one of the neatest things that we've added to our life in the past 3 years is being part of the Pflugerville Taekwondo.
Shout out to Steve and Tammy Barkley. David and Sarah Barkley.
Yeah. That environment has drastically changed our family. It has added so much quality and many opportunities for my children. A couple years ago, they were invited to be part of a leadership class at Taekwondo. And so they went through the leadership training, but they began to learn above and beyond just normal little helpful hints on how to be a good leader. They actually began to learn how to lead a class. And so at age 13, 14, 15, they were given different roles and responsibility, different segments of a class to teach. And as they were going through all of their own testings and all of their trainings, they were getting more self-confidence, but they were also allowed the privilege of teaching other children. And, we've always encouraged our kids to teach and be part of younger children. It's a blessing to be with younger children and welcome younger children.
Well, when they have a bunch of younger brothers and sisters, it's pretty easy for them to always be around younger ones.
But the Taekwondo shop really gave them an opportunity to to become rhetorical in their knowledge. So not only did they learn new skills and practice it, but they began to teach. And over time, they began to lead classes. And then a couple of them actually work there now. And, my 10-year-old daughter just got invited to her leadership class. And we've just found opportunities at our church, at Church of Glad Tidings. My children have been involved in running the sound, been part of a Kid City band, been part of the team that helps with the Kid City Children's Church. My children have been involved in Royal Family Kids Camp. We continue just to look for opportunities to serve and be part of something bigger than ourselves. Some of it is personal, and some of it is for our church. Some of it is for our community. But we are constantly looking, and we put them in positions where they need to interact with other adults, where they need to learn how to talk to adults and be able to make decisions. And
I think that's like huge, is making sure that your kids are in the environment with adults. I spoke for Moolah U. Moolah U works with kids. It's kind of a summer camp program, and they, have kids come in and they start this business. But I was so impressed that each of these guys really knew how to interact with adults. So I would say one of the biggest things in terms of, how do you educate the next generation in leadership principles is make sure that you're putting them in front of adults and seeing how they're handling adults, which, by the way, that means you need to be in those kinds of positions. You need to be in a place where you have those kind of connections with adults. You can't kind of be a hermit living on an island somewhere and then expect that your kids are going to do it. So it's a very
Unless you have a very strong D that you're married to, because then you can still be a hermit while they're out there being very social. So.
Well, that does mean, yes, one of you in the marriage, in the family, needs to be kind of a social butterfly. Mm-hmm. And that tends to be me.
Yes.
I know that's shocking. What other thoughts do you have? We're recording this portion, but I am in the chat room, and some of you guys are, at least I hope, I'm speaking prophetically, that you are asking questions in the chat room and on Twitter at Jay Schober. Jennifer, this was kind of the theme of this was negotiate to get your needs met. You have any last thoughts?
I can go back to negotiating to get your needs met. It is not easy sometimes to do so.
With me?
Not so.
You don't think that I'm an easy negotiator?
It is not an easy task to negotiate to get your needs met, but it's imperative for good communication.
What it means, I will tell you this. If you think that negotiating to get your needs met is going to mean no conflict,
nope.
That is not what it means.
No.
In fact, I contend that a relationship, whether it's a business relationship or a family relationship, but if you have a relationship that has no conflict, you have a very unhealthy relationship. Now, certainly there is unhealthy conflict, and I think we all know what that looks like, but don't strive to have no conflict, because you're going to have conflict. And I think what we need to strive for is working through that conflict and getting to what everyone's, hopes and dreams and wants and needs are. And then from there, I really do think that in most cases, maybe not all, but I do think that in most cases, we really can strive to have win-win solutions.
Agree.
Well, Jennifer, thank you for coming on and being part of this webinar. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
If anyone wants to see more of Jennifer, send us a tweet, send us something in the chat room that says you want to see more of Jennifer. Maybe next time we'll actually have a video camera. What do you think, Jennifer?
Oh, absolutely not.
You want to put a video camera on to do one of these things next time?
No, thank you.
You don't think so?
No, thank you.
Well, thanks so much. I appreciate you listening. We hope that some of this has helped. That's the purpose behind this, and look forward to chatting with you. All right, there we go.
Hi, this is Dan Miller, and welcome to the Coaching 101.
Well, that's not Dan Miller. We don't want to listen to Dan Miller. We want to listen to John Schober. Hey, thanks for joining. I know there were 4 or 5 people in the chat room. We are back to live, so the pre-recorded portion is over. I'm going to be here in the chat room for a couple more minutes. Thanks so much for being a part of this seminar. Hope that it was helpful to you. If you would, send us a chat or tweet or an email I want to do these more often. So the question is, what would you like for us to talk about? What can we chat about? How can we make these webinars useful to you? So thanks so much. Have a great day. It's election night. And so go enjoy the rest of the evening. Thanks a lot.